We begin our Wednesday edition with some breaking news from the US. Viewers, billionaire Elon Musk has backed down from his raging fight against President Donald Trump. In fact, Musk has posted on his social media platform X, expressing regret about some of his posts regarding United States President Donald Trump only last week. He said, and I'm quoting here, "I regret some of my posts about President Donald Trump last week. They went too far." Elon Musk posted on X just moments ago. Meanwhile, Musk and Trump engaged in a public feud over TV interviews and social media X posts after the Tesla and SpaceX billionaire CEO left his role in the government and criticized the Republican Party's new proposed tax bill. My colleague Gauri Dwivedi joins us for the latest on this. Gauri, is this a simple case of a change of heart, or is there something more at play with around $40 billion on the line?
Billions of dollars are indeed on the line, Arjun, and Elon Musk has finally accepted the fact that some of his tweets did go too far because the questions were raised not just about Trump as a president, but also Trump's character and conduct in the past as well, when he referred to Trump being in the Jeffrey Epstein file. So that is a very serious allegation, something that did evoke a very sharp and a strong response from the Trump camp, and that tells you that how quickly this spat became so bitter, so personal, and so ugly. Now there is an olive branch that Elon Musk has extended, but we still don't know whether President Trump has taken it or will accept that or not. If he does, then that will mean the end of this really bitter fallout, but still early days to say, because in last couple of days back, Elon Musk did express an interest to have a phone call, something that was turned down by the president himself when he responded to reporters saying that he's not going to entertain any phone call with Elon Musk. So it's still early days to see whether this olive branch will be accepted, but what I can say is that there are indeed billions of dollars at stake for Elon Musk, whether it's the electric vehicle business or some of his other business prospects as well. There's a reason why $100 billion was wiped off from his net worth and from Tesla, because the shareholders saw through this spat being erosion of value. So that really remains to be seen.
Thank you so much for unpacking the latest for our viewers there, Gauri. Now on to our top focus on this Wednesday edition of the World Report. Viewers, a Pakistani suspect has been extradited from Canada to the United States on Tuesday. Why? To face charges for plotting to carry out an attack on Jews in New York City, the Justice Department has said. 20-year-old Mohammad Shahzeb Khan, also known as Shahzeb Jadoon, was arrested in Canada in September last year. Viewers, according to a criminal complaint, Khan planned to travel to New York and carry out a mass shooting in support of the Islamic State at a Jewish center in Brooklyn on the 7th of October, anniversary of the deadly 2023 Hamas attack on Israel. Let's cut to my colleague Gauri Dwivedi once again, who's got the latest for us.
Arjun, the fact is, this is something that India has all along been saying, which is that Pakistan is a global terror threat, not just for India, but for the world. There have been several instances as early as August 2024, when Pakistanis have been deported, held in the US on very serious terror plots, and this is no exception. But in the backdrop of, despite these repeated such instances coming to light, and India's insistence that Pakistan should be blacklisted, should not be on any of those UN sanction committees, the Trump administration is actually lauding the Pakistani leadership, which brings us to ask the question that is there a complete disconnect, or is it because of commercial interests that the Trump administration, which many feel the family of the president tied to Pakistan through some crypto interests, is the reason why Pakistani leadership is being lauded by President Trump instead of being called out that here is a country which exports terror and US is also at the receiving end of it. It's not just India, and that I think is the larger question that the Trump administration needs to now be held accountable for.
Well, pertinent question you raised there, Gauri, and thank you so much for unpacking that for our viewers. Moving on. The National Guard troops began protecting immigration agents as they made arrests in Los Angeles, an expansion of their duties that had been in fact limited to protecting federal property. On Tuesday, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass issued a curfew for the city's downtown area following several days of intense protests against ICE raids that also saw clashes between demonstrators and law enforcement. Viewers, as you see on your screens right now, widespread vandalism and some looting as well, particularly during the late night and early morning hours. Meanwhile, California Governor Gavin Newsom has condemned President Trump's deployment of the military in Los Angeles, and he's called it a brazen abuse of power in a televised speech. Listen in to the war of words that has in fact erupted.
Within the span of a few decades, Los Angeles has gone from being one of the cleanest, safest, and most beautiful cities on earth to being a trash heap with entire neighborhoods under the control of transnational gangs and criminal networks. It's horrible what's happened so quickly. As the entire world can now see, uncontrolled migration leads to chaos, dysfunction, and disorder. And you know what? They have it in Europe too. It's happening in many of the countries of Europe. They don't like it when I say it, but I'll say it loudly and clearly. They better do something before it's too late. Very simply, we will liberate Los Angeles and make it free, clean, and safe again. It's happening very quickly.
Donald Trump, without consulting California law enforcement leaders, commandeered 2,000 of our state's National Guard members to deploy on our streets, illegally and for no reason. This brazen abuse of power by a sitting president inflamed a combustible situation, putting our people, our officers, and even our National Guard at risk.
Local authorities have been repeatedly saying that they have the power and the bandwidth to manage the situation. They don't need federal agencies and federal task forces there. They don't need Marines in place that can only make the situation worse, is what they're saying. But this Trump versus Newsom fight is not, backing down. This is continuing. Statements are being filed, and a lawsuit has also been filed. So the situation on the ground remains tense, but it's scattered protests now as we speak. There have been lootings, yes, but they have been in many places which are scattered. It's not concentrated in one place. So the situation is simmering, but it's sort of better than before. But more than 400 arrests have been made. So the situation continues to simmer. There are tensions on the ground. Troop deployments are continuing to come in. So it doesn't seem likely to stop anytime soon. It all boils down to what Trump will do next and what Newsom decides to do in counter to that.
US President Donald Trump warned people on Tuesday against protesting at the weekend military parade in Washington, marking the US Army's 250th anniversary. Now, the event on Saturday marks the 250th anniversary of the US Army and coincides, in fact, with Trump's 79th birthday. That's correct. The day will feature an army festival on the National Mall, a military parade sorts through the Capitol, and a mass enlistment and re-enlistment ceremony led by the US President himself. Law enforcement is preparing for massive crowds. According to US Secret Service Special Agents in Charge, Matt McCool, thousands of personnel from federal and local agencies will also be deployed. Meanwhile, at least 9 permits have been issued for protests on that day. Both the FBI and the Metropolitan Police said that there have been no credible threats as of now. And for the 5th time, SpaceX's Axiom 4 mission that will carry India's second astronaut Subhanshu Shukla to space has been postponed. In a post on social media platform X, SpaceX said the mission to the International Space Station was deferred again due to a technical glitch, a LOX leak or an oxygen leak as they're calling it, in its Falcon 9 rocket, viewers, that is being used for this launch. The new date for the launch is yet to be decided. Group Captain Shukla will be the first Indian to fly to the ISS under the private astronaut mission that will launch on board a SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule on a Falcon 9 rocket from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. After 2 days of intense negotiations in London, US and China have reached an agreement to put their trade truce back on track and also remove China's export restrictions on rare earths. It's a deal which is now awaiting a nod from the leaders of the two countries. US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick told reporters that the agreement reached in London would in fact remove some of the recent US export restrictions but did not provide details of the same. While his Chinese counterpart, Vice Commerce Minister Jaishankar, also said a trade framework had been reached in principle that would in fact be taken back to the US and Chinese leaders. Listen in to what the site said.
Over the last couple of days, the two teams had very in-depth exchange.
我们的沟通是非常专业、理性、深入、坦诚的。
Our communication has been very professional, rational, in-depth, and candid.
双方原则上就落实两国元首6月5号通话共识以及日内瓦会谈共识达成了框架。
The two sides agreed in principle the framework for implementing the consensus of the two heads of state in their phone call on the 5th of June, as well as the consensus of the meeting in Geneva.
External Affairs Minister Jaishankar on Tuesday called on the European Union to view the conflict with Pakistan as India versus terroristan. This as he highlighted India's zero-tolerance stance on terrorism. During a joint press conference with EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy in Brussels, in fact, Jaishankar was asked about the India-Pakistan conflict in the wake of the Pahalgam terror attack. Listen in to his response.
Finally, it's about India-Pakistan conflict. I would say, will the EU take any initiatives about that to resolve the conflict at peaceful way?
I'd like you to understand, this is not a conflict between two states per se. This is actually a response to the threat and to the practice of terrorism. So I would urge you to make it, don't think of it as India-Pakistan, think of it as India-terroristan. You will then appreciate it.
And in fresh trouble for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's government, the UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand and Norway have sanctioned, in fact, on two Israeli government ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, for inciting violence against Palestinians in their campaign to gain control of the new settlements in the West Bank. Ben-Gvir, the security minister in Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government, and Smotrich, the finance minister, in fact, will face travel bans and have any assets in these 5 countries frozen, stressing that they were being sanctioned in a personal capacity with no restrictions on the ministries they lead. Netanyahu has promised to retaliate. Meanwhile, listen into what Australia's PM Anthony Albanese had to say on the matter.
What we've done here is make a specific decision based upon the positions that have been put forward by these two Israeli ministers, based upon our concerns about the expansion of settlements in West Bank, based upon our concerns about violence in the area being promoted, including by the actions and rhetoric of these ministers.
Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro denied involvement in an alleged plot to overthrow the country's current president, Luiz Ignacio de Silva, and remain in power. Along with 7 co-conspirators, the 70-year-old former president is standing trial over the events which led to the storming of the government buildings by its supporters on the 8th of January 2023. That's a week after Lula's inauguration. He was facing charges that could in fact bring decades behind bars. Appearing before the Supreme Court for the first time on Tuesday, Bolsonaro, who ruled the country between 2019 and 2022, said a coup was a abominable thing and that there was never even a possibility of a coup in my government. Here's Bill.
Só tem uma coisa a afirmar, a Vossa Excelência. Da minha parte, por parte de comandantes militares, outros estados do meu lado, nunca se falou em golpe. Golpe é uma coisa abominável. O golpe até seria fácil começar. O after day que é simplesmente imprevisível e danoso para todo mundo. O Brasil não poderia passar por uma experiência dessa. E não foi sequer cogitado essa hipótese de golpe no meu governo.
Miguel Uribe, a conservative Colombian presidential hopeful shot in the head from a close range during a rally over the weekend, remains in critical condition Tuesday. Uribe Turbe was attacked in a park in the Fontibon neighborhood when armed assailants shot him from behind, according to his Conservative Democratic Centre party, which also released a statement calling it an unacceptable act of violence. Uribe's wife, Maria Claudia Tarazona, has said that her husband was still fighting for his life, stressing, in fact, that the violent situation which her family is going through is a shared experience with all Colombians. In the neighborhood, Argentina's Supreme Court has upheld the 6-year prison sentence on corruption charges for former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. The court ruling disqualifies the leader of South American country's opposition movement, also known as Peronism, from holding public office. It left Fernández, one of Argentina's most important political figures of the past 2 decades, at the brink of an arrest by authorities. She governed for 8 years after succeeding her husband in 2007. Under her watch, in fact, Argentina became notorious for its unbridled state spending and massive budget deficits.
Cuando fui a declarar durante más de 3 o 4 horas, en lo cual puse todos los puntos sobre las IES, sostuve antes de levantarme que la sentencia ya estaba escrita y no me equivocaba, desgraciadamente.
Thousands of people in Austria have held a candlelight vigil for the victims of the school shooting in which 10 people were killed. A former school student opened fire at the school in Austria's second biggest city on Tuesday, injuring many others. Police said the 21-year-old suspect, a former student, took his own life in the school bathroom shortly after the gun attack in Graz on Tuesday, the deadliest in the country's recent history. There was no immediate information on the motive of the 21-year-old man who had no previous criminal record. Human-caused climate change has raised temperatures in Iceland and Greenland by several degrees during a record-setting May heat wave, raising concerns about far-reaching implications on melting Arctic ice has for weather around the world. Scientists said in an analysis, in fact, released Wednesday, Greenland ice sheets melted many times faster than normal during the heat wave, while parts of Iceland saw temperatures more than 10 degrees Celsius above average. Iceland, in fact, set a new record for its warmest temperature in May when the airport hit 26.6 degrees on the 15th of May. The Arctic is one of the fastest warming places on Earth. Here's more.
So what we found by looking at this extreme heat, particularly over Iceland, but we also looked over parts of Greenland, that it was an absolute record-breaking event. So it was much hotter than May has ever been in Iceland. At least, so it was the hottest 1 week that Iceland has ever had in May.